So in 2024, a really controversial tax bill in Kenya did more than just cause a stir. It basically ignited a fire. A super powerful youth-led movement flooded the streets demanding change, only to be met with this absolutely brutal state crackdown. We're going to get into the story of that fight, a battle for the very future of a nation. And that really is the big question here, isn't it? What turns a simple tax protest into a full-blown revolution? To really get what happened in Kenya, we've got to look at all the ingredients that created this perfect storm of discontent. Okay, so first we have to set the stage. The political environment really centered around President William Ruto. And, his leadership was already being tested by a sluggish economy and rising inflation long before any of this even kicked off. And there's some really critical history here. President Ruto had actually faced an investigation at the International Criminal Court for post-election violence way back in 2007. Now, his case was dismissed, but a whole other case involving a lawyer named Paul Gachero alleged that witnesses had been bribed. All of this history kind of helps explain why the public was already so skeptical of the political establishment right from the jump. So, with that backdrop, let's talk about the spark itself. The super controversial 2024 finance bill. This wasn't just some random piece of legislation. It was a document that felt like it was designed to squeeze every last shilling from ordinary Kenyans. I mean, just look at this list. Seriously, these aren't luxury goods we're talking about. The proposed taxes were on absolute necessities: bread, diapers, sugar. And then they went after the digital lifelines of the modern economy: your mobile phone, money transfers, internet data, and then topped it all off with a deeply unpopular motor vehicle tax. For a lot of people, this felt less like a policy and more like a direct attack on their daily survival. And if you want to know who was hit hardest by this, you just need to see this one number: 65%. That's how much of Kenya's population is young people. You've got a generation that's already dealing with high unemployment and a rising cost of living. So these new taxes just felt like a total betrayal. This wasn't just one group's fight. It was the fight of the majority generation. And boy, did that generation respond. What started out as online anger, hashtags and viral posts, just exploded into this massive, leaderless, and at first, totally peaceful protest movement. It was all organized and executed by Kenya's incredibly tech-savvy Gen Z. The speed of it all was just staggering. I mean, look at this timeline. June 16th, protests erupt. By the 25th, they're literally breaching the parliament building. And just one day later, the president is forced to back down. In about 10 days, a youth movement brought the entire government to a standstill. It's incredible. And you can really feel the spirit of those early days in these pictures. It was a movement that was just defined by this creative energy and unity. You see the Kenyan flag everywhere, this symbol of national pride, being reclaimed by a generation that really felt like their country was slipping away from them. But, and this is so important, it quickly became about way more than just taxes. You can see how the demands evolved right here. The slogan, "Reject Finance Bill," pretty quickly morphed into "Ruto must go." Suddenly, the movement was calling for a complete overhaul, an end to corruption, real accountability, fundamental changes to how Kenya was being run. And that is when the state's response shifted dramatically. As the movement's demands got bigger, so did the severity of the crackdown. The government started striking back, and not just with batons, but with bullets and with digital chains. The human cost was just devastating. By October 2024, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights was reporting that more than 60 people had been killed. That number, it completely transforms the narrative from one of protest to one of deadly, brutal suppression. And the reason for that awful number? The state's response was just completely disproportionate and brutal. We're talking about credible reports of police using live ammunition, even snipers, against unarmed protesters. This image of heavily armed forces advancing on civilians is just such a stark contrast to those earlier pictures of peaceful demonstrations, isn't it? The state also started using these really chilling, underhanded tactics. One of the scariest was a strategy called enforced disappearance. Basically, people, especially social media influencers and activists, were being snatched off the street by plainclothes officers in unmarked cars, and then the state would just deny any knowledge of it. By late 2024, 82 of these cases had been documented. And the battle wasn't just being fought on the streets. The repression expanded into the digital world, which is ironic, because that's the very space where this whole movement was born. The state began targeting online voices with the same force it was using in the physical world. And this is where it gets really personal. Look at the faces of this digital crackdown. You have Albert Ojwang, a blogger who died in police custody over a social media post. Rose and Jerry, a software developer, arrested just for creating a tool to help people email their feedback to Parliament. Even a BBC documentary that investigated the killings of protesters was censored by the government. The message couldn't have been clearer. Dissent, in any form, online or off, was not going to be tolerated. But, that's not where the story ends. Repression wasn't the final word. This last part is all about how the movement and its allies fought back, finding new ways to resist, even when it was incredibly dangerous. And this chart, wow, it just lays out the two opposing forces so clearly. On one side, you've got the state's tactics, live ammo, abductions, censorship. But on the other side, a really surprising source of resistance started to emerge, the judiciary. Kenya's courts began to systematically push back, banning live ammunition, ordering protesters to be released, and even overturning protest bans. In fact, right in the middle of all this chaos, people started describing the judiciary as a bright spot and a vital line of defense for human rights. It became one of the few institutions that was actively trying to protect the civic space that was shrinking so fast. And of course, the people, they adapted too. They had to. As street protests got more and more dangerous, dissent just found new places to live. People organized on Twitter, now X Spaces, with over 100,000 people joining one session alone. Chants of Ruto must go started erupting in nightclubs and churches and even at football matches. The movement became decentralized, it became everywhere, and it became impossible to contain. Which, well, that brings us to where things are now. This struggle is far from over. It's this ongoing battle between a determined, creative youth movement and a state that just continues to escalate its control over both the physical world and the digital one. And that leaves us with this huge question, one that Kenya is trying to answer right now, and honestly, one that has implications for all of us. When the streets are too dangerous and the web is being watched, where does dissent go? Because it doesn't just disappear. It adapts, it evolves, and it finds a way.